It was supposed to be a normal Halloween night, just candy, laughter, and empty streets. But somewhere at the edge of town, the lights ended and the woods began. That's where 15-year-old Neil heard a whisper behind him, a voice that knew his name. He thought it was just a prank, until the voice said, "You'll never return." Greetings, every shadow hides a story. Welcome. Under the bed. It happened in a small Midwestern town on Halloween night, October 31st, 2006. I was 15, wearing a thrift store hockey mask and a hoodie because it was cold, out with 2 friends from school, Tyler and Josh. We were just kids walking the same loop we always did, hitting the same porches, the same cul-de-sacs, the church lot with the trunk-or-treaters, the gas station where the clerk handed out lollipops if you said Happy Halloween loud enough. Parents drove slow behind clusters of kids, orange porch lights were on, and the air smelled like wet leaves and cheap chocolate. It felt like every other year, safe in the way a small town at night can trick you into believing it's safe. By 9, the younger kids had gone in and the streets were mostly empty. Tyler had to be home by 9:30 and Josh's mom texted him to head back, so they cut across Maple toward their neighborhood. I said I'd finish the last block and catch up. We fist bumped, and I watched them disappear under a line of dim streetlights. I wasn't trying to be brave. I just wanted a heavy bag. The last block was Cedar Street, a row of bungalows with porches close to the sidewalk and narrow driveways. Almost every house had a carved pumpkin. At the very end of Cedar, where the road dead-ended into a thin stand of trees, there was a place I didn't recognize. It looked older than the others, as if someone had dragged a farmhouse from the county line and dropped it there. The grass was high. No porch light, just a single pumpkin on the top step with a face cut badly, triangles uneven, mouth like a ripped smile. The windows were dark except for a faint orange flicker like a candle somewhere inside. My breath came out in white puffs and I remember my fingers hurting from the cold around the handle of my plastic bag. I stood at the bottom step, telling myself one more house. The wood creaked when I went up. The door wasn't closed all the way. It had that loose, old house gap where you see a slice of entryway. I knocked anyway. The sound was dull, like there was fabric hanging inside. No footsteps. No TV. No dog. I knocked again and said, "Trick or treat," feeling stupid because there was no light and no bowl. The flicker inside moved a little, like a candle flame bending. I leaned to look, but all I saw was a narrow hall with wallpaper that had probably been white once. A smell came out, dust and something sweet, like apples left too long on a counter. I waited, listening to my own breathing, the distant rumble of a car somewhere back on Maple, the scraping of a branch against the side of the house. I decided it wasn't worth it. I turned to go, stepping down to the second stair, and that's when I heard it, a child's voice, clear and close and small. "Turn around." I thought it was a kid on the sidewalk messing with me. I looked left, then right. Cedar Street was empty. The wind lifted the edge of a leaf pile and pushed it along the curb. My skin went tight. I swallowed and faced the door again. "Hello?" I said. "Is someone there?" The candle flicker stilled, as if whoever held it had stopped moving. I took one step toward the threshold and the hinge complained, a long, thin metal cry. I didn't want to be the idiot who walked inside someone's house on Halloween, so I backed off and put my foot on the top stair to leave. "Turn around," the voice said again, exactly the same tone and distance, like a recording played from just behind my shoulder. I spun toward the street, heart thudding. There was no one. No shapes, no kids, no parents, no headlights, just the quiet breathing of the neighborhood and the sound of my bag crackling because I was gripping it too hard. The smart move was to go. I told myself that and started down the steps. My shoe hit the walk and then the sidewalk and I picked up my pace until I was almost jogging. I didn't look back. When I reached the corner where Cedar meets nothing, I finally let myself turn around to see if the candle still flickered in that slice of hallway. There was no house. The sidewalk ended in a strip of mud and beyond it, a cut in the trees I swear hadn't been there when we came down the block earlier. The pumpkin, the porch, the dark windows, gone. In their place a narrow path, more like a game trail, pressed into brush and saplings that shouldn't have been that tall. The path went straight into the woods behind where the house should have been, a thin green-black hallway under branches that breathed in the wind. I stood there, shivering in my hoodie, feeling stupid and cold and suddenly unsure of my own map of the town. Maybe I'd turned wrong without noticing, or maybe the house was back a lot and the path led to its driveway. That was the reasonable thought. I told myself that as I stepped off the curb and onto the dirt. My sneaker sank a little. It smelled like damp leaves and iron. I lifted my phone to check the time and saw no service in the corner. That wasn't unusual near the trees, I told myself. It was always bad by the creek. The path drew my eyes the way a hallway does when you know the bathroom is at the very end. I didn't want to go in, but I also didn't want to walk back down Cedar imagining that empty doorway behind me. The wind shifted and the branches whispered together overhead. "Turn around," the child's voice said again, faint, from somewhere ahead this time. I took a breath that tasted like cold metal and followed the path into the dark. The air changed the moment I stepped off the pavement. It wasn't just colder, it was heavier, as if the night itself pressed closer. The faint sounds of the neighborhood, distant music, the occasional laugh, a barking dog, faded so quickly it felt unnatural. My shoes crunched over damp leaves, the flashlight on my phone cutting a narrow beam ahead. I told myself I'd only go a few meters, just far enough to see where the trail ended, maybe to prove it really did lead to a backyard or an old shed. But the farther I walked, the less I could see the glow of the street behind me. The trees leaned over the path, thin trunks bending like they were listening. My light hit patches of moss and bits of trash, a crushed soda can, a torn candy wrapper, but nothing that looked like part of a house. The ground was soft, sucking faintly at my shoes. Every step sounded louder than it should have. After about a minute I turned, expecting to see the opening where I'd come in. There was only more darkness, the trees closing in on both sides. "Okay," I muttered to myself. "That's far enough." When I turned back, the path seemed different, narrower, twisting slightly, like it had moved. I felt a pulse of panic and started walking faster, hoping to find a way out to another street. That's when I heard it, a laugh. A child's laugh, short and quick, coming from somewhere ahead and to the right. It wasn't the same voice as before, this one was higher, lighter. "Hello?" I called, trying to sound confident. "Is someone there?" Silence. My phone's battery icon flashed red, then the screen dimmed. I tapped it and kept the light pointed forward. The trees looked closer now, too close, branches tangled like arms reaching for each other. Then, on the ground ahead, I saw a small paper bag. It was the kind used for Halloween treats, orange with little black pumpkins printed on it. It looked new. I knelt down and opened it. Inside were a few pieces of candy, Reese's, a Milky Way, but underneath them lay several round, dull coins. They were cold to the touch, older than anything I'd ever seen, the edges worn smooth. I wiped one against my sleeve and saw a date, 1957. I dropped them back in the bag and stood up fast, heart hammering. Something moved behind me. Leaves crunched softly, like someone stepping carefully, not wanting to be heard. I spun, shining my light into the dark. Nothing. Just the trunks and the shifting fog that had started to roll between them. The sound came again, a few steps closer this time. "Stop messing with me!" I shouted, though I knew no one should be out here. The footsteps stopped. The forest went dead silent. Even the wind stopped moving the branches. My breathing sounded too loud. Then a whisper drifted from the dark, low and close. "Neil." I froze. The voice had said my name. Not "Hey kid" or "Who's there," my name, in a tone that matched my mother's exactly. For half a second I almost answered, but something in me tightened. The sound came again, a little warped now, like someone imitating her. "Neil, come here." I backed away, the phone trembling in my hand. "Mom?" I said, barely above a whisper. The voice chuckled softly, then shifted. When it spoke again, it sounded like me. My own voice, echoing back. "Neil, over here." The beam of light flickered, catching something pale between the trees. At first, I thought it was another kid, a costume maybe, but as I moved closer, the shape didn't move. It was still, like a figure waiting. The face was covered by a mask just like mine, the same hockey mask, only darker, smeared with something that looked like dried mud, or blood. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a root. The light hit the ground and bounced across another paper bag, this one torn open. Inside were more of those coins. I dropped my own bag of candy and ran. Branches whipped at my arms as I pushed through the underbrush, following what I hoped was the same trail. Every few seconds I heard that laugh again, always behind me, always the same distance no matter how fast I moved. My phone light blinked, then died completely. For a moment, the dark was absolute. I stopped, gasping, trying to get my bearings. I turned to look back and saw faint movement between the trees, a shape walking slowly after me, shoulders hunched, head tilted. "Neil," it was my voice again, coming from that direction. "You dropped something." I didn't answer. I turned and ran until I saw a weak, yellow glow ahead. Relief hit me so fast I almost cried. I pushed through the last of the brush, expecting to see the end of Cedar Street, a porch light, anything familiar. But it wasn't the street. It was another clearing, round and empty except for a single tree in the center. Hanging from one of its branches was a small lantern, the kind that runs on a candle. The light inside flickered weakly, barely enough to reach the ground. I walked closer, breathing hard. The lantern swayed even though the air was still. Next to it, half buried in the dirt, was a small notebook, the cover stained and warped from moisture. I picked it up. The pages were yellowed, but some writing was still visible. The first page read, October 31st, 1994. I didn't notice I was in the woods. My mouth went dry. I flipped another page. The handwriting was shakier, the ink smudged. The last line read, "Something keeps calling my name." Then I heard it again, right behind me, my own voice whispering the same words from the notebook, syllable by syllable. I turned, slowly. The air around me felt thicker, as if the fog had weight. My breath came out in uneven clouds. I could still hear the echo of my own voice fading among the trees, the way sound does in an empty gym, bouncing, distorting. I kept turning in circles, flashing my dead phone's useless screen, half expecting the light to come back. It didn't. The small lantern hanging from the branch cast just enough glow for me to see a few steps ahead. The notebook trembled in my hands. I flipped through the remaining pages, hoping to find something that explained who wrote it. Most of the ink had bled through, but one name was still visible near the back, Neil Peterson. My stomach dropped. That was my name. The same spelling, even the same messy capital N. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I tried to tell myself someone had just made it up, some kid before me, coincidence, a prank maybe. But my fingers kept tracing those letters as if I needed to feel them to believe they were real. The page crinkled under my thumb. Then, from somewhere deep in the trees, the voice called again. It wasn't whispering anymore. It was shouting. My name, drawn out, angry. "Neil!" I froze. The lantern's light flickered violently, casting huge, twisting shadows across the clearing. The voice came again, closer. "Come back." It sounded rough, like something trying to force words through a throat not made for speaking. I ran. The ground was uneven, sucking at my shoes, branches slapping my face. I followed where I thought the path had been, but it was gone. Every direction looked the same. The fog moved like smoke, wrapping around my legs. When I finally stopped, gasping for air, I realized I couldn't hear the forest anymore, no wind, no crunch of leaves, nothing. Then I heard a low hum, mechanical, steady, somewhere ahead. I stumbled toward it, hoping it was a generator or maybe a road. The fog thinned enough to reveal a car. An old police cruiser, pale blue and covered with dirt. It looked abandoned for decades, tires flat, one door hanging open. The hum came from the radio inside, still on but filled with static. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. The seats were torn, but something rested on the passenger side, a small bundle of papers, wrapped in a crumbling rubber band. I pulled them out. The top page was yellowed, a police report stamped missing person. The name underlined, Neil Peterson, age 15. Disappeared on Halloween night, 1994. My hands went numb. I read it again, unable to process the date. 1994. That was 12 years before I was even born. The radio popped suddenly, cutting through the static. A voice, distorted but clear enough to understand, whispered, "Go back, before it finds you." I dropped the papers and stumbled backward, my mind racing. How could there be a missing person report with my name from 1994? I backed into the side mirror of the car, and for a split second, I saw my reflection. Only, it wasn't me. The face staring back was pale, dirt-streaked, wearing the same mask I'd seen earlier. My mask, but aged, cracked down the middle, and behind the split were eyes too dark to be human. I turned away, choking down a scream. The forest seemed to shift again, trees moving closer, their outlines bending as if they were alive. I could feel something behind me now, slow, steady steps crushing leaves. "Neil." The voice was quieter this time, almost gentle, but wrong in every way. It sounded inside my head more than in the air. I forced myself to walk, then run, clutching the notebook. The path ahead seemed to widen for a moment, like an opening. I saw light, a faint orange flicker, like fire through glass. When I reached it, I found myself in front of an old sign, half buried in moss. The letters were almost unreadable, but I made out the words Cedar Street Park, trail entrance. Relief hit me so hard my knees nearly gave out. I was close to home. But the relief lasted only a second. Because when I looked around, the trees were still wrong, too tall, too silent. I stepped forward, calling out, "Hello? Can anyone hear me?" The silence broke with a sound like whispering wind, except it was made of words. Thousands of tiny voices murmuring at once, repeating the same phrase, "You'll never return. You'll never return." I clamped my hands over my ears, shouting for them to stop, but the words came from inside my chest, vibrating through me. The lantern light I still carried flickered again, then went out completely. For a few seconds, there was only darkness. When the light returned, faint and blue from the moon through the fog, I realized I was standing in front of the house again. The same house from the end of Cedar Street, the one that wasn't supposed to be there. Only now it looked older, the wood blackened, the windows shattered. The door stood wide open. Inside, a single candle flickered. I took one step back, shaking my head. I didn't want to go in. Every part of me screamed to run the other way. Then I heard a soft knock, from inside the house, like someone knocking back. "Neil," the voice said, from the doorway. "You made it back." My throat went dry. I wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Then the voice said, calm and final, "You'll never return." The ground beneath me shifted. The candle's light flared, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes, the air felt different again, warmer, heavier, filled with a faint metallic smell like rain before a storm. I was lying on damp soil, my head pounding. The forest around me was dim, washed in gray morning light that filtered through the trees. I sat up slowly, my body aching, trying to remember how I got there. The last thing I recalled was the candlelight flaring and the ground opening beneath me. I was still clutching the notebook, now wet and smeared with dirt. The pages had gone blank except for one line burned into the paper, as if written by heat instead of ink, "You made it back." I stuffed it into my hoodie pocket and stood, brushing the mud from my jeans. Somewhere nearby, a crow cawed once, harsh and loud, and then silence settled again. Ahead of me, through the thinning fog, I saw the faint glint of metal. I walked toward it carefully, pushing aside wet branches. It was the same police car I had found before, only now it looked even older. The paint had almost peeled away completely, leaving the body a dull gray. Moss covered the hood. The tires were gone. And yet, the radio inside was still on, emitting a low static hum. I leaned against the driver's door, catching my breath. The inside smelled like rust and wet fabric. On the passenger seat lay the same papers I had seen earlier, the ones from the missing persons file. I picked them up again, trying to convince myself I'd hallucinated the date. But it hadn't changed. October 31st, 1994. Neil Peterson, age 15. I looked closer this time. Attached to the back of the file was a small, grainy photograph, black and white, almost faded to nothing. It showed a boy standing in front of the same Cedar Street house, smiling, wearing a hockey mask pushed up on his head. I could barely make out his eyes, but there was something painfully familiar about his posture, his shape, even the way his left hand held the trick-or-treat bag. I realized with a shock that he looked exactly like me. My throat tightened. "That's not possible," I whispered. Then the radio crackled again. "Unit 14, do you copy?" The voice was sharp, official, but too clear for a device that shouldn't be working. I picked up the receiver slowly. "Hello? This is Neil. I think I'm lost. Can you hear me?" Static filled the air for a few seconds, then the same voice returned, softer this time, distorted. "Go back, before it finds you." I dropped the receiver. The words echoed around the car like they'd been spoken from inside it. The mirrors vibrated faintly. I looked into the rearview mirror and froze. Behind me, standing just outside the open car door, was someone, or something. The figure wore my clothes. My same hoodie, same jeans. The face was covered by that cracked hockey mask. I turned instantly, but no one was there. Only the empty woods. The mirror showed it again, closer now, a hand resting on the car's roof. But in reality, the roof was clean, no prints, no movement. My pulse hammered. I backed away from the cruiser, my sneakers crunching broken glass. The air grew colder again, the fog rolling in so thick it swallowed the trees. I could barely see 2 steps ahead. I thought I heard the sound of footsteps following me, but they stopped every time I stopped. Eventually I stumbled out of the fog into another clearing. This one was wider, and at the center stood a wooden sign, broken, but still legible. Cedar Trail Nature Reserve. Beneath it, half buried in dirt, was a small wooden post with police tape wrapped around it, faded to white. My hands trembled as I brushed it clean. The tape had the words "Do Not Cross, Investigation Site." I realized then that the car, the house, even the notebook, they might all be remnants of the same investigation. Something had happened here, long before me. I thought of the 1994 report. A boy my age. My name. The same costume. The same woods. A shiver crawled up my back. Maybe I hadn't wandered into the woods at all. Maybe I'd somehow walked into his story, the part that was never finished. As the thought hit me, the ground vibrated softly, like a heartbeat under the dirt. The crow from before screeched overhead, flying in frantic circles. I took a step back, but the fog closed in again, spinning around me like smoke. Through it, faintly, I heard the same voice from the radio, only now slower, colder. "You should have gone back." The trees began to move. Not bend in the wind, move, sliding silently around me like they were rearranging themselves. Their roots twisted through the soil. The sound was deep and wet. I turned to run, but no direction looked familiar. Then, just beyond the mist, I saw a light. A warm, yellow glow, soft and flickering. A human voice called out from that direction. "Neil! Over here!" It was my mother's voice. I didn't even think. I ran toward it, my lungs burning. The light grew brighter, then changed, white headlights cutting through the fog. I stumbled onto a road. My shoes hit asphalt. The ground felt solid again. 2 police cars sat parked there, doors open, officers stepping out. A woman ran forward, crying out my name. It was my mom, her face pale and wet with tears. She threw her arms around me. "Neil, oh my God. Where were you?" I couldn't speak. My whole body shook. The officers asked questions, how long I'd been gone, where I'd been. I just stared at the woods behind them. In the distance, between the trees, I thought I saw a figure standing, still and silent, wearing my mask. I blinked, and it was gone. The flashing blue lights painted the road in rhythm, scattering across the wet pavement and the line of trees beyond. I sat in the back of the ambulance, wrapped in a gray blanket, my hands still shaking. The air smelled like smoke and rain. My mom sat next to me, gripping my arm like she thought I might disappear again. The paramedic checked my pulse for the third time, muttering that I was just cold and dehydrated. They said they found me about half a mile from the end of Cedar Street, standing in the middle of the road. I had scratches on my arms, mud in my hair, and no memory of how long I'd been gone. The last text I'd sent my mom was from 9:12 p.m., but when they picked me up, her phone showed it was already dawn. Somehow, I'd been missing for nearly 10 hours. The police asked questions that didn't fit together. Did I see anyone? Did I fall? Was I alone? I told them the truth, or at least the parts that made sense. The woods. The voices. The notebook. The old car. The boy who looked like me. The one officer, an older man with a badge that read Hollis, looked at me like he'd heard it before. When I mentioned the missing boy from 1994, he stopped writing. "Son," he said quietly, "you said his name was Neil Peterson?" I nodded. My throat was dry. He exchanged a glance with another officer, then looked back at me. "That case, it was closed years ago. They never found the kid. His parents moved away. You probably heard stories. Happens every Halloween around here." But his eyes said something else, like he wanted to believe that explanation as much as I did. After the questions, they let me go home. The drive was silent. The town looked ordinary again. Sunlight caught on car windows, leaves drifted across yards, and plastic skeletons still hung from porches. But everything felt different, hollow, as if something underneath had shifted. At home, my mom ran the bath and made hot chocolate, hovering like she was afraid to let me out of sight. When she left the room to answer the phone, I dumped the contents of my trick-or-treat bag onto the table. Candy bars spilled out, wrappers torn and damp. And then something heavier clattered onto the wood, round, dull coins, the same kind I'd found in the forest. Their surfaces were corroded but faintly readable. The dates: 1994, 1957, 1963. My hands went cold. I ran to the kitchen window. The woods behind our neighborhood stretched far and still. Nothing moved. But I could feel something, like the air itself was watching. That night, I woke to a sound outside my window. A faint tapping, rhythmic, almost polite. Tap. 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 My room was dark except for the orange streetlight glow. I froze, listening. It came again, 3 short knocks against the glass. I whispered, "Mom?" No answer. I pulled the curtain just enough to see. The yard was empty. The trees stood still. But there, at the very edge of the light, something hung from a low branch, a small paper bag, orange with black pumpkins. The same kind from before. My stomach twisted. I opened the window just enough to hear the wind. It was carrying a whisper. "You made it back." The voice was my own. I shut the window, locked it, and sat with my back against the wall until morning. The next day, 2 officers came to speak with us again. They'd gone into the woods to search for the car and the house I'd described. They found nothing. No trail, no ruins, not even a clearing. Hollis said the area was sealed years ago after a flood washed it out. "You must have gotten turned around," he said. But his voice trembled. When they left, my mom asked me to rest. I tried, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me back. I kept hearing faint echoes in the vents, like a whisper repeating the same phrase, too low to understand. That evening, I finally forced myself to go through the notebook again. I expected blank pages. Instead, the words had returned, burned into the paper like before. The handwriting wasn't mine this time, it was neater, older. The last page read, "One of us always comes back. But never the same." I dropped it on the floor. My phone buzzed on the desk beside me. No caller ID. I hesitated, then answered. At first, there was only static. Then my own voice came through the line, quiet and steady. "You shouldn't have left." The call ended. I went to the window again. The paper bag on the branch was gone. In its place, the cracked hockey mask hung by its strap, swaying gently in the wind. I remember stepping back, heart pounding, when I saw movement in the reflection of the glass, someone standing behind me. I turned fast. No one. Just my room. That's when I noticed the mirror above my desk. It was fogged, like someone had breathed on it. Slowly, a handprint appeared from the other side of the glass, pressing out. Then words began to form beneath it, traced by an invisible finger. "You returned, for now." The light in my room flickered once, and the reflection changed. In the mirror, I wasn't alone. Behind me stood the boy from the photo, his mask gone, his face pale and wrong. He smiled. The mirror cracked. My mom burst into the room seconds later, screaming my name. The window was open. The blanket lay on the floor. The room was empty. By morning, search teams combed the woods again. They found nothing except a single police flashlight from the 1990s, lying beside a pumpkin with its candle still burning. No one ever saw me again.